Hi everyone, this is a very short video clarifying the opening that you should be writing for the argument, the final paper that we're going to be writing. It should take on a particular form. We're looking at week 14 of the class, and by the very end of this week I am asking you to submit 2 opening paragraphs. Now you do not have to have every intricacy of the argument figured out. You may not have read everything for the argument, but I am asking you to get the ball rolling, so to speak, by introducing the source that you're responding to, including a quotation from that source, and then using that as a sort of springboard or starting point for your own essay. Now, I'm going to scroll down quite a bit on the page here. We're going past Tuesday entirely. That is covered in another video, and we're looking at Thursday. So under Thursday in this video, I've got a lot of content here explaining what you should be doing for the opening. There is an excellent chapter from the book They Say, I Say that is linked right here. I don't feel like I have time to talk about this in this video, but it covers some of the intricacies of quotations, and it is really worth reading. It's short and very informative and worthwhile. The thing that I want to cover in this video is this sort of set of specific moves here, and then the primer that illustrates it. At the very bottom of the page, this is where I'm asking you to submit the paragraphs from your opening paper. If we're looking through the steps of a good opening, here they are. Start by introducing the author and article, or the documentary or the podcast, as the case may be, just whatever it is that you're responding to. Give a super quick overview of the author's main point or agenda, even if your specific argument is not responding to that specific point. Please note this is just an expected thing. Like, you're expected to give some sort of overview of what the source is trying to accomplish, and then you should set up a quotation from that source. Now notice I'm not just saying quote something, I'm saying there ought to be a little bit of work that goes into the setup. The metaphor that we covered earlier in the semester was the guy in the hallway problem. We don't want a guy in the hallway shouting into the room. We want to bring in a guest speaker and introduce the guest speaker gradually and clearly. So that's what I'm talking about here. You should be kind of saying, here is why this person is in the room. Here's what this person is saying, or here's what the source is saying. Then I'm asking for a quote, at least a little bit of a quote. It doesn't have to be huge, and it probably shouldn't be huge for what it's worth. If you're quoting like more than like 4 or 5 lines, that is too much. I'd say usually you want to limit it to about 2 lines that demonstrate the idea that comes from that source that is prompting your argument. Then use that quotation as a sort of bridge or springboard for your own argument, and then state the specific thesis that you intend to argue. Now, this process is covered in a little bit more detail in a primer. The primer is not quite ideal. I should update it. I just have not had time, but here's what it looks like, and I just want to quickly cover an example. So this is an example involving a book that you have not read. It is titled Little Girls in Pretty Boxes. I used it for years in the class. I think it's a really interesting book. It is pretty dated, though. It was from the early 2000s. Or it might have even been from the late 90s, if I remember right. So I've got several examples of how to do this. Let me just perhaps read through one of them. In her book, Little Girls in Pretty Boxes, Joan Ryan explores the less publicized side of elite child sports. The book portrays the strain placed on young female athletes, many of them children, who are training for the Olympic Games in gymnastics and figure skating, and it is, to say the least, not an idealistic picture. Ryan describes brutal scenarios in which young girls break down under the strain of intense competition. Okay, that is giving an overview. It's saying, here's Joan Ryan, here's the book that she wrote, this is her overall goal or her overall agenda. Now hit this blue bit, or this part that's highlighted in blue should be the setup for the quote. Importantly, however, Ryan acknowledges that her book is not about everyday youth athletics. She writes, this book isn't about recreational sports or the average child. It's about the elite child athlete and the American obsession with winning that has produced a training environment wherein results are bought at any cost, no matter how devastating. Now, following that, there's a little bit of an analysis of that quote. By stating this, Ryan limits the scope of her argument to a select group of athletes under tremendous pressure, and by doing so, she ignores the larger sphere of youth athletic programs, which are in fact usually beneficial for the children who participate in them. Millions of American children are involved in at least some sport during childhood, and on the argument goes. Now notice the way that this is focused is on what the student wants to argue in this case, that youth sports are beneficial. I know you haven't read Joan Ryan. There might be a little bit of missing context here, but I should quickly say the response that you write does not necessarily have to be like a direct confrontation with the source that you're responding to. Joan Ryan wrote this book about like elite programs that are taking like kids basically and forcing them to train for 40 to 50 hours a week under absolutely brutal circumstances. The student in this case is not necessarily responding to that exactly. Instead, the student's just saying, that's one view of youth athletics. I wish to promote a different view of youth athletics and focus on all the good things it can do. In other words, the student is not feeling like he or she has to say Joan Ryan is wrong. Instead, the student is just saying Joan Ryan writes about this idea. I think it's an interesting idea, but I want to provide an alternative or a different way of viewing this thing. And keep that in mind. Like the paper you write, it does not have to be like a step-by-step either agreement or disagreement with the source that you're responding to. All you need to do is start with that source. Like your paper has to start by clarifying what it is that you're responding to. Hopefully this primer helps. I definitely need to update this thing, but take a look at this. And I should also say the sample paper that is linked on Canvas, the really good final paper, that one has a really solid opening too. It's on wolf reintroduction and the politics of wolf reintroduction in Western states. Both of them, or that paper as well as this, use that opening strategy. There's more here. I don't want to focus on it too much, but I do want to quickly say we've got a totally unsatisfactory opening. And folks, if your opening looks like this, I won't even read it. It's on Canvas for you to read, but it's going to hurt your score. You've got to be a little bit more thorough and a little bit more patient in setting up the opening. So what's demonstrated here with this example of Joan Ryan, that's a good example. Please try to do something like that. If you have questions about this, get hold of me. Thanks for watching.